Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins, and welcome to Financial Juneteenth, where we talk about various forms of economic empowerment. And as you know, I wrote a book called Financial Lovemaking, which talks about how love, life, and money and everything in between come together to create the life that, hopefully, the life you want, and not the life that just happened to drop on top of you. And a person I have the opportunity to speak with today is Miss Susan Patton. Susan goes by the name the Princeton Mom. She's also the author of the book Marry Smart, which actually is going to be available again in October under a slightly different title, Marry by Choice, Not by Chance. And before I dig into this, I want to ask Miss Patton, how are you doing today?
Fantastic, Dr. Watkins. How about you? How are you doing today?
I'm doing extremely well, and I'm so happy to get a chance to talk to you. Now you and I
Likewise.
met because Tia Brown and I were doing a financial lovemaking segment, and we talked about you, and I was telling her that I loved a segment that you did where you were basically kind of going against the grain and and giving young women the same advice I would give my daughters about being empowered in your own life, making choices that are going to make you happy, and
Right?
not allowing the political climate to shape you into a person that you don't want to be. Um,
Right.
and and from what I've gathered, I did some research. You had emailed me, and I was like, "Oh, this is great. I'd love to talk to you." And then I said, "Okay, well, let me do some research here." And it turns out that some people don't like what you have to say.
Isn't that something?
It's a
Isn't that
shock. You're such a
yeah.
nice person. What's going on with that? Why is it that? In fact, I noticed in your Fox interview, it almost seemed like you. I could tell that you felt like you had to really make sure that you were trying not to be offensive when you were giving this advice, which I think was pretty benign. What is your basic premise when it comes to advice you give to young women?
No, I appreciate that. My fundamental premise here is to encourage young women to take responsibility for their lives, for their safety, for their happiness, for their success, because in the final analysis, it's all on them. I'm telling young women that they are not victims of their lives, they are architects of their lives, and they have to put in place the components of their life plan for happiness. And if if those components include the traditional roles of wife and mother, I'm telling young women, you have to embrace this and you have to plan for this. It makes me crazy when I talk to young women and they say to me, oh, well, love just happens. It doesn't. Nothing just happens. Your career doesn't just happen. Love life doesn't just happen. Family doesn't just. You have to plan for all of this. And it's stunning to me how women are thinking, oh, well, it doesn't just happen. And just as you wouldn't leave your career to chance, you shouldn't leave your personal happiness to chance. I'm telling young women that and especially educated young women, I'm telling them that there's absolutely nothing incongruous about an educated woman aspiring to marriage and motherhood. It seems as though the antagonistic feminists are so adamant about telling these young women, oh, you should want more, better than just marriage and motherhood. Those are so retrogressive. Those are things that are almost beneath you. They make you a betrayer to the sisterhood to want to pursue things like marriage and motherhood. Well, I think this is destructive. And I think we have to remind young women and encourage young women, plan, pursue what is right for you, regardless of whether it's politically correct or not. Stop being so concerned with what's politically correct and start putting in place the components for your own personal life happiness, and only you know what that is. And don't allow yourself to be bullied by feminists or by anybody else who would have you believe that what they want for you is somehow better than what you want for yourself.
Well, one thing I can say is that I like the fact that you made sure that you mentioned the antagonistic feminists as opposed to just those who are in the legitimate pursuit of equal rights for women, right?
Oh,
We
absolutely.
can all support that, but we know that there is sometimes that extreme that gets to the point where they say, we're working so hard to liberate you that we're going to force you to do what we say. But
Precisely.
that's
And
not liberating, right?
not only are they saying that we're going to force you to do what we want you to do, but they're saying when we want you to hate men, we want you to treat men disrespectfully, We want you to comport yourself in a manner that is, to my mind, disgraceful, because when they encourage young women down the path of things like casual sex and hookups, because they say, well, this is how men have had sex for generations. Women, you should go and have sex the way men have been having sex for all these many years, because this is what will empower you. Well, this is nonsense. There's nothing worse for women. I can't think of anything worse for women than to enter into an uncommitted relationship, enter into sex without a commitment. I'm telling young women that casual sex, hookups, is bad for their heart, bad for their head, bad for their soul, bad for their body. I'm telling them, you want empowerment in a relationship, look for a wonderful man who is absolutely committed to you, absolutely adores you. That's where empowerment comes.
So it sounds like you're making the ever so controversial statement that men and women are not the same. That'll get you in trouble, right? But that's kind of where you're going, right? You're kind of saying,
Not the same.
as a liberated woman, you should want what you want and not what other people tell you that you want. And
Sorry.
it's not always the same as what a man wants. Equality does not mean the same, right?
Exactly. Well, certainly I'm all supportive of the idea that women should be afforded equal rights and equal opportunities to men. Of course they should. And being of the first women to graduate from Princeton University, I'm very cognizant of the fact that I'm an early beneficiary of the good works of the women's movement. However, they've crossed over to the dark side. They've become this negative, evil, antagonistic, horrible force that is, I think, suppressing women, depressing women, oppressing women. They're encouraging women down paths that are bad for them, rather than, what I remember is that the feminist movement, the women's movement, was supposed to encourage women to pursue all that they want for themselves. Well, that's not what this current feminist movement is being identified by. This current feminist movement is so antagonistic, it's so ugly, it is so nasty, that to suggest to young women that they think independently is seen as a betrayal of the sisterhood. I've heard it a million times that I'm a betrayer of the sisterhood. Well, far from it. I'm a very independent woman. I've run many businesses. I run many businesses now. I'm an independent thinker. I live an independent life. I've always supported myself. I put myself through Princeton. I am absolutely supportive of the idea of women taking care of themselves, being responsible for themselves. Empowerment comes from owning responsibility for who you are, for what you do, for what you have in your life. And it's so important that we remind young women, you own it. You own it, and you have to plan for it. It's nobody, don't tell me that you came from, I don't want to hear where you came from. You reach a point in your life as an adult where you have to take ownership for who you are and for the life you live. Stop living in the past. We've all had things that we deal with. We've all had hardships that we've had to overcome. Move on. Move on. The more you dwell on whatever your past issues have been, the more time you're losing living in the present and planning for the future.
Interesting. So I want to make this clear. This is what I think is happening here, but I want to make sure you get a chance to say this, because people have reported something different. You're not saying to women, look, your job in college is to find a husband, or
Nope.
or your role in life is to sit in the kitchen, pregnant, barefoot,
Nope.
baking cookies. You're not saying that, right?
Nope, I am certainly not saying that.
But you've been accused of saying things like that.
Yes, I have. I've been accused of a lot of things, and that's one of them. I am not saying that your job at college is to find a husband. Your job at college is many things. It is to get a world-class education. It is to make friends that hopefully you'll have for a lifetime. It's to explore many, many interests, explore the marching band or the school newspaper or the school radio station, explore everything that's of interest to you. And if you know that you want to be married and have children, I'm telling you, you will never again have a better concentration of appropriate men to choose from than you do while you're a college student. Think about it. You're on a college campus. You're surrounded by young men who are age appropriate, who are single, who are like-minded. They chose the same school that you did. You have an opportunity to meet these men in an organic way, in class or over a meal or walking on campus or at any kind of campus functions. This is how you meet people and get to know them and form determinations as to whether they're appropriate life partners. That doesn't happen on online dating sites. That doesn't happen at work, and it shouldn't happen at work. You know that professionally I'm a human resources consultant, have been for 20 years, and I tell young women all the time, don't even think about meeting anybody at work. Don't even think about it. What an awful idea. You put your professional life at risk when you start dating around at the office. What a terrible idea. So if you take the workplace out of the scenario here of where you're going to meet somebody, and I'm saying don't even think about online dating, what a terrible idea that is. Yeah, college is exactly the right place for you to be looking for and finding a husband if, in fact, you want to be married and have children. It's not for everybody. It is not for everybody. But if you know, young girl, that you want to be married and have children, you will never have a better opportunity to find a good man than you do while you're on a college campus. And that's when you should be looking for him. And here's another thing I tell young women, and this makes me crazy, Dr. Watkins. It makes me crazy. When women say to me, well, I'm going to take the first 10 years after I graduate from college and build my career, and then I'm going to look for a husband and think about starting a family. Well, here's the problem with that. You're going to be in your mid-30s. You're going to be competing with women who are 10 years younger than you. That's not a competition you're going to do well in. Are you kidding me? You're going to wait until you're 33, 34 years old and look for a man who's how old? 34, 35? They're looking at women 10 years younger than you. Do you want to know why they're looking at women 10 years younger than you? Well, for all the obvious reasons, of course, but mostly because they're now ready to settle down and have a family, and a woman 10 years younger than you has 10 more years of fertility on her than you do. You're 35 years old. You're going to think about starting a family now? Good luck. Do you know that the AMA, according to AMA guidelines, a woman who is 35 years old and pregnant is identified as a high-risk pregnancy for advanced maternal age. So I'm saying that these men that you're interested in, these wonderful 35-year-old men who have been playing the field and building their career, and now they're 35, they want to settle down, get married. They don't want to get married to a woman who is already fertility challenged. They're looking at women 10 years younger than you.
Wow. Well, Susan, I don't know if you know this. I'm a finance professor. That's what my
Yep.
PhD's in. And, obviously, well, finance is applied economics. And I'm going to go on a limb and ask you this.
Yeah.
Have you studied economics before?
Never.
Really?
I have never.
The reason I ask this is because the things that I think that where a lot of the opposition comes from is it actually relates to an old statement I used to hear in Kentucky that the hit dog always hollers. And I think sometimes what you say when you're describing the dating market so accurately, which is similar to any other market, like the market for cars, the labor
Yep.
market, any market,
Yep.
supply,
Sure.
demand, price, all that stuff.
Sure. Sure.
When you're describing the market so accurately, I think it hurts people to have to face those realities, right? I mean, a lot of us might know, for example, that on average, a woman that's 27 is going to have an easier time in the dating market than a woman that's 37 when they're trying to
Absolutely.
attract the same guy.
Yep.
But nobody really wants to hear that because
Sorry.
everyone wants to say to that guy, no, you shouldn't want the younger, more attractive, more fertile woman. That's wrong for you to feel. So what
Of
kind of
course.
happens is it just sort of occurs, right? The guy still picks the younger woman, and
Of course.
but he doesn't say anything
Of
because he
course.
doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So do you think that's what's going on? That maybe it'd be easier for people to ignore what you were saying if what you were saying was inaccurate and untrue.
Well, I think that these are very hard truths. And I have many women that I went to college with, women that I know who bought into this absurd idea that, well, you could take all the time that you want to settle down and start a family. What you really need to do is focus on your career. They wound up in their 30s, 40s, now in their 50s, and either never got married or got married late and couldn't have all the children that they wanted, or couldn't have any children at all. This is a very hard truth to tell young women, that you do have a limited window of opportunity within which to bear your own children. If you want to have your own children, you better be on that baby making train by the time you're in your early 30s, which means you better get married by the time you're in your 20s, which means you better think about finding yourself a husband in your early 20s, because that's when you're at your most attractive, your most fertile. This is when you will have your choice of men. Wait until you're 35 and you're going to be competing with women that simply you can't compete with. And if you doubt the truth of what I'm saying, go ask your maiden aunt. She can tell you when she's done feeding the cats.
Wow, feeding the cats. Before we move into the next topic that I want to ask you about, what you're saying also makes me think about one of my adopted kids. She's like a daughter to me, and
Uh-huh.
she went to Columbia, which is a good school, and it's a liberal school.
Yeah,
And there was a strong feminist influence when she was there,
sure.
and so she would share her ideas with me. But what I noticed was that when it came to picking a mate, she did exactly what you were saying. She's a long term planner.
Yep.
She met her, the guy that she loves, at the right time when guys were everywhere, and they're on their way to getting married. And but yet at the same time, she's still pursuing all of her personal goals, professionally and otherwise.
Right.
She's just sort of doing it simultaneously as opposed
Yes,
to sequentially. And
exactly.
so
And
that's
I
what I'm
think
saying.
that's also critically important. Do it, do all of it. Do all of it. We talk about having it all, pursue it all, pursue it all. And I think the reason that young women are reluctant to pursue meaningful relationships that lead to marriage is because it's just become a politically incorrect thing to do for educated women. And we have to remind these young women that there's nothing incongruous about an educated woman wanting marriage and motherhood. And I think it's also especially important for women of color who are outperforming men of color, both academically and professionally. I'm telling these girls, these black women on campus, look for the guys here. These are the men that you want to connect with, that you want to stay in contact with, that you want to date for years until everybody's ready to settle down and get married, because you're never going to find a better crop of wonderful men than you have right here. And you have an opportunity to get to know them, stay in touch with them, date them for as long as necessary until everybody's ready to get married.
That was such a powerfully accurate statement, because I remember talking to a friend of mine who was a physician in her mid 30s, and she said, when I was a little girl, my mother used to push me so hard to achieve professionally that a lot of our mothers forgot to tell us about the other things that you want to
Yeah,
achieve in life besides your professional success. And I can't disagree with what you just said.
yeah,
So in order to save your time, I want to ask you about this thing. This is actually an article you sent over to me, and I want to make sure
sure.
we get to this, because this really touched me, because I was affected by this.
Oh,
You sent over an article in which it seemed that the article, and I'll let you elaborate on this, but it seemed that the argument was that because the political correctness climate and related as it relates to feminism has become so rigid and so scary, almost
yeah,
McCarthyist in a way.
yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Well put.
yeah,
That's right.
you have a lot of young men that are afraid to approach women. That they're like, oh my God, if I buy her a drink, or if I ask her out, or if I give her a kiss, I might be perceived as
A
contributing to
rapist.
rape culture, right?
Right.
And the reason that this was a sensitive spot for me, I mean, that's why I was talking to my business manager about you this morning, was
Yeah.
because about 2 months ago, maybe a month and a half, I wrote an article where I was writing it for black men, and I was talking to good black men, men who would never hurt a woman under any circumstances. I made that very clear, and I said, well, sometimes you in media, you're convinced that as a man you're supposed to go sleeping around with every girl that offers you the chance to do it. If she's
Yeah.
pretty, you're supposed to lay down with her. I said, look, don't do that, because you don't know what you're getting yourself into.
That's
That's how
right.
you get unwanted pregnancies. That's how you get STDs. And sometimes you may be the victim of a false rape accusation,
Precisely.
or a misunderstanding because both of you were drunk and nobody knows what happened. So as the man, you're going to be the one walking away in handcuffs, and as a black man, it's going to be tougher for you to defend yourself in the
Absolutely.
court of law, especially if you're
Absolutely.
not rich enough to pay for attorneys. So I told guys, be very careful, watch out, and it's even similar to what you were saying about the workplace. You know, when I first got my job at Syracuse University, the advice my dad gave me was, he said it in his own words. My dad, he cusses like a sailor, but he basically said, don't you blank anything
Yep.
on that campus.
Yep.
So he said,
Right.
don't, as a professor, don't mess with any of the students, don't mess around with
Absolutely.
any of your coworkers. There are plenty of women out
Absolutely.
here for you to meet because you're putting too much at risk. So that was, I guess, the spirit behind my piece. But let me tell you this: I had really angry feminists attacking me, and I didn't understand it. It was hurtful. These were friends, some of them. I didn't understand where it was coming from, and they even recited this horrible statistic in which, and I want you to talk about this. Here I am doing all the talking, but I
That's
got to
okay.
tell you this. They recited this horrible statistic, and they repeated it. Many of them said they recited the same talking point, and I said there's some coordination going on here. They recited this horrible statistic that was on a liberal blog that claimed that the odds of a man being falsely accused of rape were lower than the odds of being struck by lightning. I said that is bullcrap. That's not
Right.
true. So I went and I dug into the research, and it turned out the study wasn't scientific. It was
Right.
highly inaccurate.
Right.
Real scholars gave real data, because I said, "Am I crazy?" Because I know guys who've been falsely accused, and I,
Absolutely.
or acquitted or bad, So maybe what's going on here? And so what I found was that they were lying. They wanted to
Yeah.
make their point so bad that they literally were repeating the same
Right.
statistic that was an absolute lie. And
Right.
it made me angry, Susan, because I want to respect the truth. I think we should,
Absolutely.
and I said, you want to win so bad that you don't want to know the truth behind this issue. You don't want to know that maybe there are some men out here who need good advice. You don't want to understand the fact that I'm not promoting rape culture. I think that they felt that by defending the men who are falsely accused, I am attacking legitimate victims. I said, no, I made it clear. I don't support the idea of a man ever having sex with a woman against her will. But for the guys who don't want to do that, make sure you don't end up putting yourself in a bad situation.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
please, tell me about
Well,
this
there's
article.
so much. We could talk about this forever. You know that there's
Yes.
so much to say about this. Well, firstly, the idea that there's a rape culture troubles me. I'm so troubled by the statistic of 1 in 5 women is going to be sexually assaulted or raped on college campuses. I hate that statistic. It's so false. The White House is putting it forward. It's been quoted everywhere, 1 in 5. You've seen it, yes? The statistic 1 in 5. It comes from a 2010 CDC study, interviews that were conducted over the phone, where women were asked questions like, did you ever have sex because you were lied to? What?
Wait, does that counts as rape now?
It does.
Okay.
Questions like, did you ever have sex with a man who said if you didn't, he would break up with you? Did
Okay.
you ever have sex with someone who showed you that they'd be really, really unhappy if you didn't have sex with them?
Hmm.
Well, an affirmative answer to any one of those questions or a bunch more equally asinine questions puts you in the yes, I've been raped column. Well, this makes me insane. This makes me insane. Clearly, this is not good if you've had sex under these false pretenses, but it's not rape. Let's not call it rape. Let's not create this rape culture hysteria. This is not rape. That you had sex with someone because they showed you they'd be really, really unhappy if you didn't. That's not rape. That's sex under false pretenses. Let's call it what it is. And to say that it's rape, there's so much that's wrong about it, not the least of which is that it dilutes the true horror of the crime of real rape. So I hate that. I absolutely hate that. Two, I think that this perpetuation of the notion that campuses now are just a hotbed of rape. My God, they're making campuses sound like a women's prison at this point. It's not. It couldn't possibly be. And I've been so reluctant to give advice to young men because my premise has always been women have to do this differently than men because women have a limited window of opportunity within which to have their own children. So they have to be smart about how they date, how they marry, and start. Because men can take their whole lives to get married and have children. There isn't that same biological imperative. So I've been reluctant to give men advice previously, but now I'm saying to young men, you better be very, very careful about who you connect with. Some crazy woman who is going to look to either absolve her own sense of guilt because she did something that she regrets in the morning, or a woman who is vindictive and is looking to just get back at you because you said something about her she didn't want. I don't know. But the consequences are dire. And with the revision of law now, it denies young men due process. Have you read about this?
I've read some of it.
It would make your hair curl. Even you, it would make even your hair curl.
Well, that's a pretty good task.
It's it's absolutely horrendous how the laws now are so stacked against young men. There's no longer a presumption of innocence. There is quite the opposite. A young man who's accused of rape is looked at as a rapist until he proves himself innocent. Well, that's not the American judicial system. When he's brought to trial, this kangaroo trial within university confines, he is not entitled to have a lawyer present. He's not entitled to know who his accuser is. He's not entitled to see the accusations, specifically the evidence against him. This is a complete controversion, a complete reversal of just law, of constitutional law. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a legal scholar by any means, but I read this and it makes me insane. The thought that we have so overcorrected that we have come to a point where we have put this on young men, and it's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. I don't know what the answer is here. I'm telling young men, you better be very careful who you hook up with. I mean, really, really careful, because all you need is one, psycho woman to truly destroy your life. Get you kicked out of school, destroy your life, give you a criminal record that you'll never get out from under.
I'll tell you. I had I had a very good friend in school, and it's funny. You would think that me being an advocate for the African American community, that
Yeah.
this best friend would be another black man, but he wasn't.
Yep.
He was a white guy, and he had fun in college. He slept with a lot more women than I did. I guess because he was better looking. They probably liked him more than me. But
Hard to believe that, Dr. Watkins. Hard to believe that.
I know, it's so tough to believe. But but I'll say this. I was faced with a situation where he was accused of sexual assault, and here's what I observed from the outside in, and here was my processing. First of all, um, when he was accused, they came to his job, put him in
Mm-hmm.
handcuffs.
Oh,
So he was arrested in front of all his coworkers. He worked across the street from his house, so his neighbors saw him get arrested. He lost his job. He was in jail for 3 weeks. He couldn't finish school that semester. He had to drop out of school,
it
and
doesn't even matter whether he was guilty or innocent at this point. He was guilty in the eyes of everybody who observed all of this.
exactly.
Horrible.
Exactly.
Horrible.
And he couldn't, and I remember he had been saving $3,000 for a car. He spent all that on his lawyer.
I'm sure.
And now here was my dilemma. I have daughters, and I love the women in my family, and so
Yep.
I am adamantly against anybody who would ever commit sexual assault. And the other thing is, he was my friend, but I'd never been around when he was having sex. So I
Right.
didn't, I didn't know what to do. I'm not going to run out here and say, oh, I know he didn't do it. I don't
You
know.
don't know.
Right, right. So I just watched this go down and said, okay, I'm gonna try to find the truth here, so that I
Right.
can make sure my friend receives justice, which doesn't mean necessarily a not guilty verdict. It means justice.
Right.
Well, check this out. So they did an investigation. He hired a private detective. The private detective found out that this woman had falsely accused 5 other men of sexual
Oh,
assault. It was kind of a somehow she was able to make money from this. I think that if she accused the man of rape on the job, that she could go to the company and somehow by suing them or filing something, she could they would
What?
pay her money, and and so when I saw that, that's when it became clear to me. Okay, it looks like he didn't do it, and I thought about that. I thought about that for years, and I said, oh my God, this all happened because he was accused of something, and even when it was all done, she didn't go to jail. they they didn't give him his money back that he spent on those lawyers. He didn't get that time back. That the trauma he experienced just from being in jail.
Right.
And that's
And you don't
scary.
get your reputation back. And that kind of accusation, even if you walk away with a clear verdict of innocent or of not guilty, rather, that's never promoted. That's never written about in the press. That's not remembered. What's remembered is that you were taken away in handcuffs. That people don't get past that. And even if it's said, well, he was found not guilty, in the back of people's minds, there's some people's minds, there will be a question. There will be a question of whether this was just fancy lawyering that got him off. It's awful. And one of the things that contributes to this terrible situation, of course, is substance abuse. It's the alcohol and marijuana or whatever it is that kids are using today to excess. To excess. I'm telling young women that because when they are, I'm telling them that it's up to them to remain sober enough, straight enough to extricate themselves from a situation that's headed south. First and foremost, that they're responsible for their own safety. It's nobody else's job to keep themselves safe. They have to keep themselves safe. So I've been accused of blaming victims. I'm not blaming victims. I'm saying don't be a victim. Don't be a victim. You don't want your house robbed? Lock your door, for God's sake. This isn't so hard. You don't want to be a victim of sexual assault? Remain straight, remain sober, don't drink to excess, don't be so stoned that you don't know what you're doing and where you're going. And if, God forbid, you actually are the victim of a sexual assault and you're so drunk and you're so stoned, you can't even provide testimony in a trial.
Wow.
You're not a reliable witness anymore. So everything about the culture that has led young people on college campuses to drink to excess, to black out. Do you know this expression, to black out?
Hmm.
Okay, I didn't know about this until recently. But young people enter into their weekend sometimes saying, I'm going to black out this weekend. What? Are you
Wow,
kidding me?
wow. That,
I'm going
that,
to black out this weekend? I'm going to be so drunk and so stoned that I'm no longer responsible for what I do or what is done to me? You
hmm.
must be kidding me. You must be kidding me.
It's a
I'm
dangerous thing.
telling young women, there are 4 pillars here that I think are critically important to restore what I'm saying is a wholesome, normal, appealing dating paradigm on college campuses. And it's all on women to do this. I'm saying sobriety, number 1. You have to remain sober. You have to be straight enough to know what you're doing and who you're doing it with. 2, responsibility. I'm telling young women, you are responsible for your own safety. It's not his job to not rape you, although, of course, nobody should rape you. Nobody should rape anybody. Nobody should be a criminal, and this is a criminal act. But you are responsible for risk prevention. You are responsible for making sure you keep yourself safe. The third thing I'm telling young women, and I've gotten beaten up about this plenty as well, modesty. Do not be falling out of your clothes. Do not be. I'm sorry. I know it's a politically incorrect thing to say, but I'm telling young women, look at yourself before you walk out the door. You cannot be falling out of your clothes. Your behind can't be, lower than your hem. Your heels shouldn't be so high that, that you could barely walk on. Come on, look at yourself. Look at yourself. I know you're laughing because you know how politically incorrect this is.
Oh,
But I am telling
I'm
them,
laughing. I'm laughing because I agree with you. That's that. I mean, it, it doesn't. Maybe it doesn't sound right to say this, but I've been a man for my whole life, and I can say that that there are expectations that men have of women and women have of men, and
yep,
they're not always symmetric.
that's right.
I don't look
That's
to
right.
a woman to do everything that she would expect me to do as a man. There are things, there are maybe some extra burdens I must carry because I am the man,
Right,
and I understand that. Well,
right.
for example, I could go maybe meet a woman in her Burger King uniform and decide I want to date her. But if I'm wearing the Burger King uniform and I have no money, that's gonna reflect on me differently than it might
Yeah,
on her. It's just a
that's
fact,
right.
right?
Yeah.
So I agree. So please continue. You had your
So,
fourth virtue.
yeah, I'm on a roll here. You see it. I'm
Please,
on a roll.
please go. Keep going. Keep going.
So, in terms of modesty, yeah, you have to be careful about how you dress yourself, how you comport yourself. So many of the women's rights groups, the antagonistic feminists, they're saying that whether you drink too much or dress provocatively is not an invitation to be raped. Well, of course, it's not an invitation. Nothing is an invitation to be raped. They're saying that sex requires consent. Okay, I got that. But here's the problem: verbal consent almost never happens. I mean, think about it. You're on a date. Does it really ever happen that somebody says, "Well, now would we like to have sex?" And you don't say that. I would like to have sex with you now. That doesn't happen. You think it. There are messages. There are physical and behavioral messages that you send that take the place of that verbal consent. Because again, I'm saying it simply doesn't happen that young people say to each other, "Well, I would like to have sex with you now. Would you like to have sex with me now?" That really doesn't happen. But what does happen is I'm silly drunk, I'm stupid drunk, I'm falling out of my clothes, I'm draped all over you, I'm saying, I'm whispering nasty things in your ear. That's the sort of de facto consent. It's de facto consent. And I think most young men who are with a woman who is draped all over him, falling out of her clothes, whispering nasty things in his ear about what she'd like to do to him and have him do to her. Yeah, I think that he says to himself, this woman wants to have sex with me now. And it's not an unreasonable thing for him to think. So again, I'm telling young women, modesty, this is important. 4 things. So sobriety, responsibility, modesty, and the 4th thing I'm saying is kindness. It seems as though there's a lack of just basic courtesy among young people when they're dating, a lack of just basic courtesy, kindness. Wow. If I were a young woman on a college campus today, these are the things that I would be thinking to myself. You know what? I want to restore a normal, wholesome dating paradigm. I want a young man to ask me out on a date. Young people, and I talk to them all the time. I lecture on college campuses frequently. They don't even know when they're on a date. They don't even know when they're on a date. They don't know when they're on a date. Well, how would I know if I'm on a date? We're in a group. We sort of are wandering around together as a group. He didn't really ask me to be with him, but we're together. We wind up, going back to his room. We have sex. I go home. Was that a date?
Sounds like it was a date.
Bad date, but okay. I guess they don't know when they're on a date because they do things in groups and they wind up intimate way sooner than they should ever be intimate. Is that really a date? I don't know. I think a date is a young man, and I know I'm old fashioned like this, but I think a date is a young man calls a young woman or texts her, I guess today, or sends her an email saying, "I so enjoy being with you. Do you think maybe on Friday or Saturday we could, get a burger together or go to a movie or, watch blah, blah, blah on TV?" And she says, "I would really love that. Wouldn't that be fun?" And he says, "Okay, great. Then I'll pick you up at 7. Okay, that's great." And then she plans for the next 3 days what she's going to wear, and she giggles with her girlfriends about it and feels good about it and looks forward to it. To me, that's a date.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it sounds like you're advocating for men and women to just respect each other, right? Um,
Absolutely.
you know,
Precisely.
yeah, I know that one of the big battles I constantly have, in for example, hip hop music and things like that is I tell my daughters and I tell young women, I say, look, men are not supposed to talk to you like that. The way this
Uh-uh.
this guy is singing to you in the song, this doesn't compute well for me because
Doesn't send the right message.
you're right. You go by just a few years, not that long ago, men serenaded women. They felt that being with that woman was a luxury, was a privilege, was an opportunity.
Precisely.
Right.
Precisely.
It wasn't sort of an obligation that as soon as I meet you, you're going to get naked and give me what I want, and I'm
Right.
not going to give you anything in return. So I think that
Right.
you're right that on both sides of the fence, that respect is so important. And I think it really says a lot, to a young woman. If a man shows that respect for you, that means that he is probably going to be willing to give you the things that are going to make you happy. And it's funny, almost like when you go back to the market, or excuse me, the market analogy for dating. My conclusion is that I used to try to figure out, Susan, why would somebody date someone who just doesn't respect them, or someone who mistreats them, maybe someone who abuses them? And what I
Right.
realize is that we shop for our mate in the same way we might shop for a job, or shop for a car, or shop for an
Yeah.
outfit. Some people shop for shoes and they say, "I want these shoes because they're going to make my feet feel good. They're comfortable. I don't care what they look like. I feel good putting these shoes on." And then some people shop for shoes that are overpriced. They're going to empty their bank account. They don't even like them, but they know other people are going to like them, and the shoes are
Right.
incredibly uncomfortable. But they
Uncomfortable.
wear them because somehow wearing these shoes
Makes them the object of envy.
there you go. It makes them feel like a better person. They're getting this validation from other people
Right.
saying, "Oh, you
That's
have a
right.
pair of red bottom shoes or whatever," and
Right.
and it seems that that's how we pick our mates. Sometimes we'll pick a horrible, mean, nasty, abusive person because for a guy, for example, because he's happy that all of his friends are saying, "Oh my God, you're dating that gorgeous woman," and
Right.
and, and, and my thought is, maybe with a little self-esteem, you'll say, maybe I can have both. I can meet that gorgeous woman who's also gonna respect me. I mean,
Yeah.
I know as a man, I've always felt that a man who feels disrespected doesn't feel like a complete man. And
That's not a complete
he's
man.
right. He's going to
Not
be
that.
less of the man that you were attracted to. And the same thing is absolutely true for women as well. Make sure those men respect you. And I think that's
Agreed.
where you're going with, and
Yeah.
that's why I support you. And I love what you're doing. And I've taken up 41 minutes and 27 seconds of your time, and I'm not going to take any more of it. But I'm going to buy your book. And I'm going to tell you
Please do.
this, and I'm going to go ahead and put this out there that I will probably get in so much trouble from the liberal academic
It's okay.
types that follow me because I support you. But I tell them, look, you got to think for yourself.
Absolutely.
Freedom of thought is paramount here,
Yep.
and this whole idea of jumping into a political camp and believing things that you wouldn't believe otherwise, it's not helpful to people. And I mentioned to you earlier, and you're not old enough to be my mother, but you remind me of my mom because
That's a good thing.
my
I'm
mother,
sure that's a good thing.
absolutely, my mother's the most beautiful woman on this planet, of course, and one thing she always says that I agree with is that she says, "I'm not a feminist, I'm a familyist."
Right.
And when you get to that point where you're fighting so hard to make your point and to win these battles, you have to realize that you're not going to find love if you're always looking for war, right?
Right.
You
That's
may
right.
win the battle, but you're going to lose your family, you're going to lose your
Yep.
happiness, you're going to lose all
Yep.
the things that matter to you because you're trying to maintain some sort of image for the sisterhood or whatever it is that people have fed to you. And that's where I think you and I
Yep.
definitely align.
Absolutely. You got to be true to yourself. You have to be respectful of others. We have to keep talking, Dr. Watkins. You know that. There's a bunch more stuff that we need to be talking about. I got your number and you've got mine.
Yes, absolutely. This has been so much fun, and I'm so happy that you reached out, and it was great to talk to you. And I
Great
want to
talk.
encourage everybody
Yeah.
to go follow Susan. Her Twitter handle is the Princeton Mom, so it's an easy thing to remember. And most of you love Michelle and Barack, and Michelle went to Princeton, so that's a good way to remember. The title of her book, the current title is Marry Smart. In October, there will be another release, and it will be titled Marry by Choice, Not by Chance. And in general, don't live your life by chance. Make the choice to have the life that you want. I think that everybody watching can agree with that. So, thank you so much, Miss Patton. I really appreciate your time.
What a pleasure talking to you. All the best. We'll talk again soon. I'm going to look forward to it.
Absolutely, the pleasure's all mine. Take care.
Take care.